Welcome. You've tuned into the NCO Guide podcast with your host, Command Sergeant Major Dan Elder, U.S. Army, retired. The NCO Guide is your source of uncensored discussion and commentary specifically for U.S. Army non-commissioned officers. You can tune into our podcast, sign up for our blog, or follow us in social media channels for professional discussion and sharing of knowledge and information between me and my guests and our subscribers. You can reach the NCO Guide online at danelder.com. Go there using your computer or smartphone. Leave us comments or click on the Ask a Question link. The NCO Guide is sponsored by pptclasses.com, the pre-made military training site. Now, drop your rucksack, pull up a footlocker, and prepare to engage your brain-housing group for another episode of the NCO Guide. Hua?
Hua. Hey, everybody. Welcome to podcast number 8. This podcast number 8 of the NCO Guide. This week, we've got a special treat for you. Joining me today is Command Sergeant Major retired Joe Gainey. Joe, many of you know, served as the first Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So, Major, we're glad you're here. Thank you.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
For those who may not know much about Command Sergeant Major Gainey, Joe's been retired for a little while, but he joined the Army in June of 1975. He served almost 33 years, I think it was, just shy of it.
33 and a half.
33 and a half. He retired in 2008 in his culminating position as the Senior Enlisted Advisor to the Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, the first to serve that position. He came up as a 19 Delta Calvaryman. He was a scout. He served just about every job in that field. He was a gunner. A loader, right? You were a loader?
Yeah, a loader on a tank. They had to put me on tanks to prove that I wasn't a scout.
Yeah. So from loader to a platoon sergeant, including some time as a platoon leader in the absence of his platoon leader. He served as a drill sergeant, a first sergeant, a command sergeant major, and then had a number of increasingly important command sergeant major positions up through nominative levels at Fort Polk, Louisiana, the Armor School, the Armor Center and School, and Corps Sergeant Major. He served as a Senior Enlisted Advisor to a couple of joint assignments, Bosnia 3 times.
Yes.
Including Task Force Eagle Command Sergeant Major. Is that correct?
True. Pretty good.
That's good, huh? I did my homework on this one. So this is one interview that I really didn't want to screw up. Not only is Joe one of my mentors and heroes, he's also somebody who I look up to a lot, so I surely didn't want to screw this up. But of late, one of his, I think, culminating assignments was here at Fort Hood, where we host the NCO Guide, where he was the 3-Corps Command Sergeant Major and deployed with them during Operation Iraqi Freedom, before his ultimate selection as the Senior Enlisted Advisor. So that's a mini bio on Command Sergeant Major Gainey. If you want to know more, go to his Wikipedia page.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, right?
Yeah, we're going to talk about maybe some of the things he's learned since he's got out of the Army. Of course, we never stop learning, and it's always, as I was preparing for the interview, Joe, one of the things we'll talk about that. I'm writing that down. So one of the things Joe talked about, one of the things that I was talking about was I did a search on your name in preparation for him. It's always fun to Google yourself, and there was one page on you that was highlighting where people were using your name, face, and likeness for bad. They were pretending to be you, and there was this site that was identifying those kind of things, and you just never know what you're going to find when you search on the wild internet. So, again, we thank you. We thank you for joining our podcast here. You can find all of our podcasts and all of our content at ncoguide.net. Go there 24/7. You can reach us on our hotline, 254-853-4410. Leave us a message, and we'll get back to you. We'll use it. We try to take comments from the field and and share your questions to us. So there's a funny story here. Command Sergeant Major Gainey's playing with this a round ball bearing, and I'm going to let him kick off the podcast with the story of the round ball bearing, because I'm sure I'm going to have a follow-up to the discussion, because if anybody knows Joe Gainey, for any length of time, you probably know about this ball bearing. Go ahead, Joe.
Okay. Well, actually, to you as a ball bearing, to me as my military bearing, but I overlooked that. And I want the folks to know the reason Sergeant Major Elder looks up to me is because I'm 5'11", and he's about 5'8". Mm-hmm. He can't help but look up to me. But anyway, that's why he looks up to me. Military bearing, 1998, a young specialist, Jackson, never forget his name, was backing up a vehicle without a rear ground guide. So as a sergeant major, we all are taught if we let a problem pass by us, we are now the issue. We are the problem. So I stopped them, and I do not believe in yelling and cussing. If someone tells you that Sergeant Major Gainey cussed me out, he's fibbing. I'll tell you straight up. But I stopped him, and I did cause a significant emotional event in his life. I did do that. I always say that. And when he was leaving, I ground guided him, and he was leaving. He stopped his vehicle, got out, walked up to me, and gave me a ball bearing, as you call it. I looked at him and said, "What the heck is this?" He said, "Sergeant Major, you lost your military bearing." So that kind of irritated me. It agitated me. And I said, "Okay, specialist, how did I lose my military bearing? Did I cuss, yell, or scream at you?" He said, "No, Sergeant Major, it was your body language, it was your tone of voice." So he taught me something that day. Perception is 99% reality. You and I might think that we're the best people in the world, but it's what others see us as. So I carried it with me for 33 and a half years. And since people keep asking me for it, I now carry it in my pocket. And I challenge anyone to challenge me. But understand, if I have it, you owe me 25 push-ups. If I don't have it, I will give you one of my chips. That's it. That's the story.
Yeah. So of course, the chip, as many senior leaders in the military, one of the things they have are challenge coins. And as Sergeant Major Gainey has left the military, no longer issues challenge coins. He has his own personal collection of poker chips that are inscribed. And if you are lucky enough, my wife has been lucky enough. I haven't yet. I haven't earned one of his chips. And
well said.
So, but I also have heard legend is if you walk up and ask Sergeant Major Gainey, if you're curious about this bearing, which is a large metal spherical. This isn't a little bearing now. This is a large bearing. If you're going to challenge him, you got to challenge him now. So you say, Sergeant Major, I've heard this story about you and this bearing. I wondered if if you're carrying it. He says, if you want to know, just ask me. But it's going to cost you 25 in most cases, right?
That's right. Now I have been known not to have it on me.
Yeah.
So there's times when you don't ask me. Like in the shower.
In the shower. Okay, yeah. I got you on that one. So Joe, you joined the Army. It was a whole different time. I mean, if you really look at how our nation looks at soldiers today, it was, I think, 2004 that Time Magazine declared the person of the year was the American soldier. And if you think 2004, this was 30 years from almost from the time that you entered the Army. It was literally generations, probably one full generation, maybe two generations, if one and a half. The Army a nation has a different opinion of soldiers today than they did when you enlisted. You actually enlisted in 74, right? You were on the delayed entry program.
That's right. 'Cause my recruiter told me, and I wish I could remember his name. Folks remember people's names. But he told me, he said, "I will not permit you to join the Army until you get your high school diploma." And I owe him my whole life.
Right.
So I came back and joined.
Yeah. So the nation did not necessarily. We were fresh out of Vietnam. Though our troops came out in 73, 75 is when the conflict officially ended for our nation. So you volunteered. You weren't drafted. You weren't forced in the military. You, on your own accord, walked into the recruiting station and said, "Pick me, I want to join." What was going through your mind? Why did you want to join the service at a time where people didn't think military service was that honorable?
Because of the way I was raised. My dad taught me, if you take from a nation, you give to your nation. And myself and my brothers, every one of us joined, every one of us. But I was the only one that stayed in for 33 years. I'm the only one that made a career because I'm a believer. And I told my son, who's a major now, if you're going to ask your country for anything, benefits, you better serve your country. That's why. It had nothing to do with patriotism. Even though I was a very patriotic young man, I felt like I owed my nation for giving me the life that it had given me.
Very good.
Short and sweet.
Yeah. Now I know you were born in Florida, but you don't carry a Floridian accent.
No. They kicked me out of Florida.
They kicked you out. Well, where did they exile you to?
They exiled me to South Carolina.
South Carolina.
Yeah.
So when you talk about being raised, you were raised in the type of values that your family held true in the environment that of South Carolina in the 60s and 70s.
That's exactly right. And a lot of people don't know this, and I'll share it with you because you're doing it.
It's just us two. Nobody else is listening to this.
Well, no one else is listening to this, but us too. I'm actually Native American.
Yes.
Because, South Carolina was the Cherokee Nation before interjection shifted everybody out to, I guess it was out west.
The Trail of Tears. Yes.
Yeah, Blood of Tears. That's right. So South Carolina is my homeland, but by God, I am a Texan today.
You got here as quick as you could, is that it?
I got here as quick as my wife told me we was moving.
Yeah, I had one of those decisions as well. So
I know you did.
That's how we both ended up in the great place, right? Truly is what a great community. So under those under those conditions where it was bred into you to give back, did why the Army? Why not another branch? Why not the Marines or Air Force? So what drove you to the Army?
I like that. Navy, even though I got a relative who's a Congressional Medal of Honor awardee in the Navy, he was my mentor. 1974, the movie Jaws.
Oh, no.
And I kid you not. If there's fish that big in the ocean,
you don't want to
Joe Gainey's not going to the ocean.
Okay.
The Air Force, I never was interested in. The Marine Corps, I did go to them before the Army. And I said, I want to be a scout. Now, the Marine Corps has scout recon, and force recon, and they would not let me be a force recon, sign up as a force recon. They said, that's something you have to do later. I didn't want to do nothing later. I want to be a scout from day one. So that's why I picked the Army.
So what did you know about scouts? I mean, was it from TV? Did you have a mentor that convinced you that was a path for you?
Yeah, you could. Really, that's about it, because I always heard of Kit Carson. I've always read about the Indian Native Americans. See, I don't like the word Indian or Indian because the engine's in a car, but Native Americans were scouts. And I said, I think I could be a good scout.
Yeah.
So that's really, as corny as it sounds, that's why I wanted to be a young 11 Delta at the time.
Yeah. That's the first time I ever asked you that question. So it was really interesting for me personally to hear that. Why did you choose that? And I think so many soldiers these days have similar stories. There was a path that they chose to take. Some didn't know. They just wanted to get a degree or leave hometown USA or see the world. So there's for every soldier there's a different story, and I think it's interesting to know. These days, as I look back on my career, I spend more time reading signs on buildings. If you walk into a building, any military building, so often they're named after somebody, and there's a plaque.
Yep.
And you'll know names, like Washington or Lincoln or famous military leaders. But when you read a name like Schedule on a building at Fort Knox, Kentucky, who is Schedule? Why is his name up there? And as you read those stories, there's just every soldier's got a story.
That's right. And as a Sergeant Major at Fort Knox, I went to all those buildings, and I learned about the history of all the buildings. It's important. Now, one day, if God permits, or if Dan Elder nominates me, there will be a William J. Joe Gainey latrine. God bless it. That's what I want.
We could name the one here in our studios.
Go for it. That's all I want.
Yeah, maybe we could talk the folks at Fort Knox to do it.
They might. And that came from the movie The Green Beret. They had such an impact on me when that young sergeant, that Green Beret sergeant, all he wanted in life was a latrine named after him.
Right.
And it made such a mark on my life. All these years, I've had stuff, people say, we're going to name this after you. You know, like the Gainey Cup. I said, I don't care about all that. I just want a latrine named after me. So remember that, Dan, when I die. Nominate, because you can't, I don't know if the young people understand, living people can't have things named after them.
Right. Yeah.
I'm talking about buildings, structures, events they can. But so I had to be dead to have a latrine named after me. That's pretty sorry. You know, I got a plaque above my latrine at my house. Gainey latrine.
Very good.
Very.
So you've already started your own.
Yeah, so I can name it after this. My house.
We'll petition. We'll petition for it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't want you to leave yet, so that you still got some work on this planet to do, and, and this podcast is one of them. So, did you have any goals? You said I wanted to be a Cav Scout. I wanted to honor the traditions of my ancestors, but you know, what were you thinking? Did you want a career? Did you say I want to be the SEAC? I want to be the first. I
want to be the Sergeant Major of the Army.
You want to be the Sergeant Major of the Army.
And I was dedicated to be that. And something that I wanted to be, I didn't want to be number one. And this first time you can hear this too. I never wanted to be number one in nothing. I wanted to be the best that I could be at what I do.
Yeah.
Anybody could be number one. Anybody can have a title number one. But when you go to number one and ask him or her about their job, see how much they might not know. I wanted to be the best that I could be. I was a barracks rat. I stayed in the barracks. I read manuals in the 70s, and I lifted weights. And that's it. Until I met my bride, and I forgot all about the manuals, forgot all about the weights. No, but really, I was a typical barracks rat.
Sure. And you know, when you're talking about before you met your lovely wife, Cindy, how many years did you serve? I know you met her here in Texas. So how many years had you served as a single soldier before you were married?
2.5 years.
2.5 years.
And dedicated my life for 2.5 years to be the best soldier I can be. Because, see, understand, I was a E3 when I came to Fort Hood, and a few months later I was E5. So I was the dumbest E5 in the United States Army. So I had to depend on experience-wise. But I found that I was a lot more educated on manuals, regulations than most of my seniors.
Sure.
So I was the dumbest in experience, but I was kind of equal in knowledge.
Right. So let's continue on that same discussion. So, you know, with just a short period of time, you went from a PFC to a sergeant. Did the Army help you out by sending you any schools? When was the first time you got to go to a military, particularly a professional development school, which is different, of course, than a functional course?
I went to primary non-commissioned PNOC.
PNOC, right.
Which today is Warrior Leaders Course.
Right.
But I went as an E5.
Okay, so it was after you were promoted.
After I was promoted, because I was made an acting sergeant.
Right.
Back then they had AJs.
I was an AJ.
Yeah. I know you was. And they figured, well, now this guy's an AJ, acting sergeant, is somebody that has all the duties and responsibilities of that rank but do not get paid. I got paid as a PFC.
Right.
And then a year later they called me in and they promoted me on the spot as a sergeant, not as a Spec 5. Makes a difference because I learned that later. But I got to go to primary non-commissioned officer, PNOC.
PNOC.
And that was an experience and a half.
Right. Now, where did you attend that course? Was it here in Texas?
Fort Hood, Texas. Okay. West Fort Hood.
So West Fort Hood, you were on West Fort Hood attending the primary non-commissioned officer course.
That's right.
Which was even before PLDC, which was the predecessor to WLC. So as you kind of look at the development, really, the NCO education system was not created until the conclusion of hostilities in Vietnam.
Yep.
So, and the reason being is we really didn't have an NCO. We didn't have as an Army, there were no NCO academies Army-wide. There were installation academies, and they weren't really necessarily, they didn't all follow the same format. They were all unique and different. And some installations and some units made soldiers go multiple times for the same type of training. So it really wasn't until 73, 74, 75 that we even had NCO academies that provided a standardized training, and PNOC was the first one in our NCO education system.
And you didn't live in barracks, because you know I was a commandant in the NCO Academy.
Yes.
So our young men and women stayed in barracks. When I went to PNOC at West Fort Hood, I stayed in a pup tent for 30 days.
Yeah. Every
day. Myself and my partner slept in that tent. For 30 days, we stayed in tents out in the training area.
So then let's talk about that then. Compare what you went through as a student to what your students went through when you were a commandant, which is obviously probably even different than what we're doing today, but there's probably more similarities between when you were a commandant and when you were a student.
When I was a student, I was expected to know field skills. They call it back then they call it combat field training.
Right.
When I was a commandant, I got a congressional for putting my guys in the field, my students in the field for a week.
Wow.
And wow, that's what I said.
Yeah.
Because they weren't.
So there was a complaint made against you for putting soldiers in the field for, at that time, it was a 4-week course. Yeah. So it was for 1/4 of.
And it wasn't by the students. Mm-hmm. That's what upset me. It was by one of the instructors. Uh-huh. The students didn't mind. And when I got to PODC as a commandant, my students went out to the field for one night. They stayed in a cantonment area. When I became commandant, what I did is I made all my cadre go through the same classes that the students went through. They had to score a 98% on every written test. Now, you understand, students only got to score 70.
Right.
And they had to pass every land nav course that the students had to pass with 100%. Because, by God, I said, you're going to be the best at what you are. And you can't tell Private Gainey or Specialist Gainey what to do if you can't pass it yourself.
Sure.
And then for a week, I would make them go out, and they would divide into 6 teams. They would fight against each other. Every team had a different lodgement site. They would have to march 10 miles into that site, 10 miles, and then would have to defend that site. And every day they would move to another site. And all this was planned out. I went out and walked the ground myself. And understand that Jack Tilley was a Sergeant Major of the Army then, and he allowed me to shut my school down for 30 days.
Wow.
And the reason, and that's unknown, that's unheard of,
right.
You know that. But the reason Sergeant Major of the Army Tilley did that was allow me to train my cadre. Because I talked to him one-on-one. He came visit me, and I said, I can expect us to train our students if my cadre don't know what's going on. So they went and lived in a whole week in the field, and we planned out all these avenues. And they didn't mind then, but then when I took the students out there, and they knew I was serious about the days of going to college, when we're in the field, everybody in the field, including myself, that's when I got the IG complaint, which was okay.
Right.
I had the right to do that.
Sure. So tell me about the quality of training afterwards. So did you see improvements in, after you took your cadre out and you brought their field skills up to a higher level? How was the quality of training because of that?
It was like driving a Chevrolet and a GTO.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah. You know what I mean?
So was that good, huh?
It was that good.
He's poking fun at me because I own a souped-up GTO. So.
Well, because the cadre, by knowing they had confidence in what they did, they had ownership in what they did.
Yeah.
And the level went sky high. I mean, really, I was so pleased. I was on there for a year, but the training was increased. I was told that by the CG of the post. He said, I've never seen such qualified soldiers.
Right.
And understand it was, and I'm bragging on my school and my cadre now, not me. The school was so good because of the cadre. The commandant's only guy that steers the ship. The other people's the rowers. The special forces from Fort Bragg would send their PFCs to my school, the only school they sent them to, because the school was so good.
Right.
They actually sent some SF guys to go through the school. They gave me suggestions, and it was like a mini Q course.
Right.
But the cadre was so good that Special Forces every month sent Special Forces PFCs to my school.
Wow.
Or to our school, not my school. It wasn't the Gainey school. I believe the
not
school.
Yet.
No, I think that, not yet. I had to die for that.
Yeah.
But I think the school belongs to the cadre.
Sure.
So the training was really good. I was proud of them.
Good. Well, that's to me that's a good measure of performance. Is when you look at before an event and then after an event, where you can see the output has increased, you've gotten better and you've improved. That's a good tribute to the technique that you used. And our Army continues to go through challenges these days as we see budgets dwindle, as we see numbers come down. Dan's personal opinion is one thing that as an Army that we must continue to fund is education. I think it's so important that our education system, whether it's the NCO education, the officer education, the warrant officer, as a force, the one thing that we must provide for is continued training and education.
Airborne.
Yeah, both of them are equally important, not isolated. We must train our soldiers, then we must educate them. Because training teaches soldiers to follow orders, instructions, and battle drills, and follow them in order, do it in time, and in sequence if that's required. However, education teaches them how to think, and how to think when you must get out of order, how to get yourself back to where you need to be. So
that's right. And if I can say something real quick.
You can.
Yesterday, Cindy and I was out, and a young sergeant came up from Fort Hood and asked me about, Sergeant Major Gainey, what do you think about all this stuff, about these soldiers doing stuff to the casket, licking the and I told him, I said, use this as a lesson. Use their poor decision not to do it. So I would ask you to look at everything bad you see in life, put it in your little brain book, and say, this is not what I'm not going to do.
Right.
But I told that sergeant, I said, remember, young NCO, somebody took that picture. I'm willing to bet you your paycheck, talking to the NCO, that somebody around there was an NCO or an officer. Everybody blames the NCOs all the time, but it is a team there, guys. And I said, I bet you there's an officer and NCO someplace there out of the picture.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's punish the people for doing bad, making a wrong decision.
Right.
It wasn't a crime. They didn't commit a crime, but they made a wrong decision. But let's look at what leadership didn't train them properly.
Yeah.
So
well, that's a good topic. I mean, that's not on the list. So let's keep talking that. And really, what you're talking about is the social media. How social media has invaded soldiers' lives. You know, our whole nation. It's such a part of what we do. Invasion is probably not the right word, but I like it. The fact is people are making poor choices. And we've seen some selfies or some pictures taken or some comments made and then posted, you know, in Instagram and across the web. And then, quite frankly, people, you know, soldiers have been doing dumb things since Valley Forge. There was some dude gazing his navel, or you know, putting bunny ears over George Washington's head. I mean, it happened.
I didn't mean to do that, Elder.
So
let it go.
Did we overreact? I mean, people are talking about, you know, court martial and just, you know, locking people up for, you know, the young gal who slunk down in the car and took a picture of herself. You know, everybody's up in arms about it, and really she should be sat down and talked with. But I mean, I've seen NCOs and commissioned officers running for the door.
That's right.
Running for the door.
I made a very unpopular comment on that. I said, shame on her, but let's don't crucify her.
Yes.
What happened, folks, is think back to your basic training days. Were you taught basic customs and courtesies? You and I was, Dan Elder, because that was part of our training. But I would challenge anybody to ask themselves, were they trained that? I know the answer, but I'm not going to say it. So I'm convinced that young lady, while she did something horrible, don't crucify her.
Yeah.
Was she trained, or was she not trained to pay honor to the flag? We don't raise our right hand to protect the flag. We raise our right hand to protect the Constitution of the United States.
And follow the orders of the officers appointed above us.
Thank you.
Exactly.
And and you and I, as Sergeant Majors out here, I know for a fact, as you as the 13th College Command, I as the Corps, we've seen.
Rub that in my face.
I worked with
you.
We had a good team. That's right.
We did.
You worked with me.
Yes.
You didn't work for me. Yes. That's the key thing to remember. We worked as a team. Each of us saw people, NCOs, soldiers, and officers running towards the barracks door. Right. When they had that warning, you have a warning.
You get the 5-minute note before it happens. Right?
How many people run to the door?
Yeah. We
would have to prosecute half our army.
Yeah, exactly.
So punish, correct, but don't destroy.
Exactly. Yeah. This is a case where education, where corrective training is probably appropriate.
Yes.
This is a young soldier who though has received basic training, it comes to experience. I was a knucklehead PFC. I did some dumb things
I
as
was
a PFC.
too. I did some very dumb things.
Yeah, it's a good thing there was no social media. I'm glad there weren't no cameras around when I was a PFC.
I never would have made SEAC. I'm telling you right now.
Yeah, none of us. So, and it's funny to see the outrage. It's funny to see how other soldiers, her peers, mid-grade NCOs, I'll just talk NCOs, there are a lot of folks who, in a lot of cases, appear to be overreacting to this circumstance.
I never seen one, let's say NCOs, I never seen one comment of an NCO on how to train her, how to correct her.
Yeah.
Like maybe put her on the color guard, raising, lowering the flag.
There you
for
go.
A month.
That's a great.
You know what I'm saying? That's what you and I would have done.
Exactly.
Yeah, we would have shoot her out. We would have caused a significant motion event. That's no doubt. Yeah. But her little backside would be putting down that core flag every day for a month.
I just came back from Fort Sill, Oklahoma yesterday, and I noticed as I was driving around Fort Sill, there are signs on post that say when the flag is going up and the flag is coming down, soldiers are expected to render courtesies and honors. And that was all over the installation. It wasn't one place. I first noticed it at the PX. And it's so soon, I don't think it was in response to this event, but that installation is trying to remind soldiers, it appears to me, remind soldiers of their obligation. I learned just this week, I thought it was just timely because I heard in maybe it was social media that Fort Carson, which is where that soldier was at, is considering doing the same thing as putting signs up to remind soldiers. So,
a sign versus a sign only lasts as long as the sign lasts. Training lasts for a lifetime.
Sure.
Dan Eller told me that one day in Iraq. Sergeant Major, this sign only lasts as long as the sign. Then he ran the sign over. Then he said, but training lasts a lifetime.
Yeah. So of course, that's not my sign. But
that's a temporary fix.
Yeah. Which is my point exactly. The way you deal with it is you deal with the individual. You work through them. The sign, a good soldier does what's right in the absence of orders. They don't need a sign to tell them to salute the flag. A good soldier knows salute the flag. So those who don't, in a lot of cases, just need additional training. I'm going to
take it one more level while we're on it. A properly trained soldier does not need signs.
Yeah.
I had a senior NCO a couple days ago at Fort Hood again tell me our Army is not disciplined. And I asked him, define discipline for me, Sergeant Major. He couldn't do it.
Wow.
I said the word discipline is not just a definition. It has to be a special selected task. Just saying the Army's not disciplined don't mean nothing. Where is the Army not disciplined?
Sure.
How can we correct that problem? I said, and this Sergeant Major out there, I just told you who he was. Sergeant Major out there he was like he was lost. I said, so when you say Joe Gainey is not disciplined, that's not good enough. You got to tell me how Joe Gainey is not disciplined.
Right.
What we can do to correct his lack of discipline. So, so we still educate people.
Yeah, well, that's a topic that's on a lot of our listeners' minds these days. Don't lose your military bearing.
Oh, I won't.
That's a topic on a lot of military leaders' minds today, and I hear that, and I know you do. As we continue to interact with soldiers and leaders and NCOs, is indisciplined soldiers, and some cases the struggle to either separate them from the service or the fact that they've gotten so far along in their career. We're not talking about young soldiers, 3 and 4 years of service. I see and hear from the field so often about mid-grade and even senior NCOs, in the E78 ranks, who somehow were passed along during the high op tempo of the war, and now are in positions where they can really affect soldiers. Not just one or two, but platoons or companies or batteries or troops. So I don't know if you have those similar experiences where that there's a sense of frustration. How do I deal with this indiscipline? Yeah,
and I tell you, I agree with you. The last time I spoke on Fort Hood, Texas, won't say the unit, I go to events, the guest speaker. I asked them, and this is right along what you're saying, senior leadership is not, maybe the word discipline is not a good word, but they're not knowledgeable in tradition. We had a receiving line. And I asked and they had her standing on the receiving line, the red carpet. And I asked a very senior NCO, I said, "Sir, soldier," I almost blew it. Yeah. "Soldier, are we supposed to be standing on the carpet?" He said, "Oh, yes, Sergeant Major. Yeah, that's what it said in regulation." Bonk. The carpet is, I'm sorry, I'm back. We were not standing on it. He had people walking across it. And I asked him, I said, "My mistake, Dan Elder's fault." I said, "Are we not supposed to be standing on the carpet?" He said, "No, Sergeant Major, we're not supposed to be standing on the carpet." And that's when the bonk went off in my brain. Because the regulation says that the people in the receiving line stands on the carpet to cushion their stand because they're standing so long. Everyone else walks in front of the carpet.
Right.
And I took that young man aside because, like you and I believe we have to train. A deficiency that goes uncorrected is a new policy. And I took him aside. And I told him, I said, "Look it up and tell me, prove to me I'm wrong." Well, he called me and he said, "You're not wrong."
Yeah.
"But did you learn something?" "Yes." So, see, that's just a small example at every level, from Private Gainey to Sergeant Major Gainey. We can train somebody or we can look at somebody and learn something.
Right.
You never get beyond being trained.
That goes to the beginning of our podcast is we never stop learning, and when you stop learning, you die. I think. I mean, really. We always hear about the dinosaurs, those who refuse to take on new things, and so this is all a part of some of our conversations that we have. So let me change gears for a minute. With over 33 years of experience, in your own mind, in your own opinion, as you close your eyes and you think about the answer to this question, what is a sergeant?
That's a good question. He's a specialist, because an E4 specialist is an NCO. To me, to answer your question, Joe Gainey's definition, a sergeant is someone that has agreed to take in responsibility to look after the benefits of other service members. That's all he is.
Sure.
And to me, if you look at business level, to me, he's the lowest echelon of the business leadership.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sorry, that's the way it is. Yeah. But that's a good question.
Like a shop union, or like the union steward, not even union, the shop foreman.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, shop, and he's got to take responsibility. That's. I mean, the proudest moment in my life, and it's going to shock people, was not becoming an NCO. The proudest moment of my life was becoming a private first class, because I knew I wasn't an NCO. I knew I couldn't make corporal, and I needed to prove myself back then in the 70s to my non-coms that I could be an NCO. You know what I'm saying? And that was the proudest moment in my life. And I'm still convinced that the most important part of our militaries, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, Coast Guard, is the PFCs,
right?
The E3s,
right?
Because they are the future. E4s can be corporals, E3s can't. So we spend all our effort really training an E3 to be good. We don't have to worry about the Army.
Sure.
So
what's your thoughts about the specialist rank? Some think of the specialist as the Spec 4 mafia. We don't call them Spec 4s anymore, but the specialist is in a lot of cases has not been they're not in a leadership role. Yeah. They're in between. They've been in it long enough that they're not like a private who doesn't know anything. They have hopefully mastered their craft, basic soldiering. But, specialists sometimes they don't have to take charge. They do what they're told. Good ones, if they want to get promoted, will step up to the plate. But if nobody's really twisting your arm, you can just kind of go along and get along. And
That's right. When I came in 1975, there were Spec 9s. The specialist rank went all the way up to E9. And it's exactly what you said. And I'm going to put it in a more recognized situation. We have master sergeants. Now, they're not specialists. They're master sergeants. Then we have first sergeants. What pay grade are they? E8. The first sergeant has been, and that's appointed rank. It's not a promoted rank. The first sergeant has been appointed to a position of leadership. Not saying the master sergeant should not be a leader. He should lead everyone that's underneath him in that shop or whatever. But that's the difference. You have a first sergeant who is the leader of that company. You have master sergeants who are not the leader of that company. They're the ones that are supposed to enforce the leadership.
Sure.
So that's what we need both. Right. I would never go back up to Spec 9.
Yeah.
That was horrible.
So let me ask you this question. Based on your career and your assignments, what to you was your most difficult job that you've held?
Being the first Senior Enlisted Advisor to Chairman of Joint Chiefs.
Wow, that surprises me. You know, as knowing your career and looking through your bio, you know, I see some of these things. You did all the tough jobs in the Army. I mean, you platoon sergeant, first sergeant, drill sergeant, battalion sergeant major. I mean, I'm looking at some of these things. Deployed for so many years, and of all the jobs, the Senior Enlisted Advisor was. So tell me, you know, if I'm a young soldier and I aspire to put myself in a position to move up the ladder and take on new challenges, what are the kind of things you experienced during those tough challenges could I use to help me better myself and be a better soldier?
Find positions that puts you in harm's way.
Wow, yeah.
Don't find positions that keep you back in the garrison. Get out and get dirty. My young Major Gainey, now, when he was a second lieutenant, I looked at him and I said, "Lieutenant, get dirty." He said, "Excuse me, Sergeant Major?" I said,
That's what your son said, excuse me, Sergeant.
No, he did. He called me Sergeant Major in uniform. Because he's my son, he just like I called him sir. I said, when your soldier's down in the motor pool doing maintenance day, you put your coveralls on and you get dirty. And he did. And when we was in Iraq, Sergeant Major, you don't realize, I went to Solder City and I found the Sergeant First Class in charge of my son. And he's now a command sergeant major. And I'm not mentioning his name on purpose. I know who he is because I never forget the guy. And I looked at him and I said, Sergeant First Class, drove to Solder City, and I said, Sergeant First Class, have you ever been to Korea? He said, no, Sergeant Major. You don't train Second Lieutenant Gainey, you would die in Korea. Now, did I have the authority to send him to Korea? No. Did I have the authority to keep him in Korea? No. But guess what? He didn't know that. So, but long story is now Major Gainey is respected by command sergeant majors because a Sergeant First Class took upon himself, with a little bit of threat, to train Second Lieutenant Gainey to be a fine officer.
Yeah.
To rely on his NCOs.
I think it was podcast 5 probably. We covered that Sergeant Major Davis and I actually did a podcast on who's training the lieutenant, because what you just said, which is why it was such an early podcast for us, was we don't teach NCOs particularly how to train officers. We have a role in that, and it almost seems like a role reversal where the officer outranks every non-commissioned officer in the Army, regardless of the rank. However, the platoon sergeant has this dual role to step in as a platoon leader should be required, but when that's not required, to step up and train that young officer, that inexperienced officer, I should say, because not all platoon leaders are young. I realize that. Some have served as non-commissioned officers as well. So, but that was a topic, and we really talked about there is a technique, and you're not born with it, and you're not always taught it. As you come up through the ranks, you're trying to learn how to do your job, not necessarily that to take care of your soldiers and the welfare and accomplishment of the mission, but we're not necessarily taught through our education system, or at least not mine and your education system.
We weren't taught at all. To me, see, you talked about being an officer twice in my career. I was a lieutenant twice, 82nd Airborne and 24th Infantry. I was platoon leader of 1st Platoon, 3rd 73rd Armor, 86th Airborne for 2 years. On the 3rd year, I get a second lieutenant. Now, I have been running this platoon for 2 years. I didn't want this little guy. And he's a dear friend of me. He retired as a full-bird colonel. He came up to me. He would follow me every place I go. And I turned around one day and said, Lieutenant, what are you doing? Why don't you go find some place to hide? That young lieutenant looked at me with tears coming down his cheek, no kidding, and said, Sergeant Gainey, all I want to be is successful. And that hit me like a baseball bat. So I realized that day, I'm sorry it took me to Sergeant First Class to learn this, all this young E6s and E7s have to do to train a lieutenant is treat them like the rest of the platoon.
Sure.
Involve him or her now into everything they do, and they will train that lieutenant. And this crap about, sir, you're in charge of the field operations, I'm in charge of motor pool is exactly what I just said, crap.
Yeah.
They're both involved in them. Because if you do that as a team, because you don't say specialist elder, You only had to work in the motor pool. When we go to the field, you can sleep. You don't do that.
Yeah.
So you train that lieutenant like you train all your soldiers.
Sure.
There's no special skill. It's just a technique of treating all equal. Now, they do outrank you. You know that. And they can tell you what to do. But if you train them well enough, they'll always hesitate before they tell you what to do. Right. And when they do tell you what to do, and what your answer is,
yes, sir. You got it. Yeah. No, that's such a good segue, and I appreciate that. And it just kind of helps hammer home to our listeners who are trying to gain knowledge and insight and information, and whether it's gaining knowledge and insight on the NCO Corps, whether it's how I can myself develop as a leader or as a sergeant or senior NCO, how I can become better at my craft. And really that's what it's about. It's a couple of old soldiers sharing our experiences, so we appreciate your commentary, and that's important conversation.
I need to correct you on something. Okay. See, that you understand what I said about deficiency going by? Now I have to make sure it's not a new standard. There's one old soldier, you, talking to a younger soldier, me. Okay. They're not two old soldiers sitting here. Let's make that straight right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're only as old as you feel, right?
Well, deficiency corrected, so I feel good as an NCO.
So we talked about a little bit about your service as the first Senior Enlisted Advisor to the chairman, and I know we got listeners here who are interested in this. It was unique. It was new. It was something that we hadn't had before. The services had each had their own Senior Enlisted Advisor. Tell me what you can about the creation of the position. You've already said that was one of your toughest jobs, yep. and then maybe kind of give us a sense of what at least the first SEAC did, and how maybe your chairman chose to use you.
General Myers, United States Air Force, came up with the concept. General Peter Pace is the one that put it into action. Marine Corps. Yeah. He said General Myers was Air Force 4-star. Both of them chairman and Joint Chief of Staff. They both said we need one senior sergeant major over the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, and Coast Guard, not to take the place of their individual senior enlisted, but to be over them to work, for they can work through him to work through the chairman, to work through the Secretary of Defense, to work through the President. And that's what the concept was. So I got there, didn't even have an office. General Pace actually moved a 2-star out of his office to put me on the E-ring. And then he looked at me and said, now, establish the position. So I'm not smart enough to do that. So I had a sergeant major, former, you know him, Dan, my brain went dead, I'm sorry. Tom McMurtry was my garrison sergeant major. I asked him if he would take off his reefs, because he was a command sergeant major, take off his reefs to become a sergeant major and go to the Pentagon for me. And he said, well, I don't know. I said, Tom, by doing that, I can give you 3 more years in the service. You can go past your
mandatory retirement date.
Yeah, you can go past the date you have to retire. And he agreed to it. So Tom and the team established the standards. All I did was approve them. And there was some heartache, there's some hiccups, but I'm proud to report that the second Senior Enlisted Advisor Chairman, Brian Battaglia, United States Marine Corps, has told me personally, we stay in contact all the time, that the basics that Tom and the team set up is what he's using today. Now, what he's doing, he's improving some of the stuff.
Sure.
He issued the book, put out the book that Tom and I started but never finished.
Right.
Because we had other things to worry about. A book wasn't that important to me, so maybe it should have been. But Brian did it. I'm very proud of him. Now, the reason it was the hardest job.
Now, that's the non-commissioned officers and non-commissioned and petty officers backbone of the service.
It's a very good read, but, and I told Brian this, so I'm not saying that I shouldn't. It's a very good read, but that's all, to me, that's all it is. It's a very good read. I mean, it's worth putting on your individual's reading list. It's on my SEAC reading list. The reason it was the hardest job is because of the egos. You know, every human being, Dan Elder, has egos. Well, when you become Sergeant Major of the Army, Air Force, Senior Enlisted Advisor, all the services, you have egos. And it was dealing with the 4 individual egos was the hardest, because you've been on Morales boards, Audie Murphy boards. it's all thumbs up, or he don't make it, or she don't make it. Same thing there. Secretary of Defense says, Sergeant Major, if you want something passed, I would meet with all these guys. It would all be thumbs up, or it wouldn't pass. And it was like herding a group of cats.
Right.
All of them was professionals. All of them had egos, so I had to really be careful that I didn't break any of the egos.
Right.
And that's why it was the hardest job, because when you're out doing combat missions, you don't have to worry about egos. You find, you fix, you fight, you finish the enemy. Cut and dry, the 4 Fs. There I had to be very compassionate, and I'm not used to the 4 Cs. I'm not a compassionate person. I love my soldiers, but I ain't gonna cry on your shoulder for no reason. And I would have to really baby these guys, and I don't mind them knowing it, to make sure the best is for their services. Now, I will tell you, and I need to let you know this, I sat on every promotion board of each service because I wanted to see how my soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines were being promoted. And a Navy guy might say, well, you're not a sailor. Why are they your sailors? Because as a Senior Enlisted Advisor Chairman, I had responsibility of the training of all and the promotions of all the services. People don't realize that. So I sat on their promotion. And I'll tell you right now, all of them was good. The Army, to me, had the best system.
Wow.
It's not as good, oh boy, what everybody thinks. Yeah. Just do your job, be the best that you can be, and you'll get promoted. But that's why it was hardest, because I had to do all this stuff as far as the training, and I would actually visit each of the services' basic training. I went to Hell Week for the Navy SEALs. I went to the Crucible for the Marine Corps, not because I wanted to prove that I was macho, because I'm not. I want to see how they're being trained. Because you and I grew up, if I'm asked Private Elder to climb over a wall, I'm a demonstrator. You're a drill sergeant, correct? In our day, we demonstrated it first. Okay?
Tell name, explain, and demonstrate.
You demonstrate it. That's right. And I can tell you now, I don't know if they're still doing it. I'm not going to say yeah or nay. But I demonstrated. I wanted to be able to see what the sailors, airmen, and Marines was going through.
Sure.
I knew what the soldiers was going through.
Right.
And National Guard, by the way. We can't forget them. And Coast Guard. I went to all their training. But that's why it was the hardest job. It was the individual 4 people, 5 people's egos.
Right. And of course, each service has their own their own service. I'm not sure the word, but they want to look out for their own branch of the service and hold that dear to them. And so as you're dealing with those different agencies, or those different offices, those different people, the Senior Enlisted Advisors. Were there things that you did to try to build the team? I mean, and really, let me ask this in another way. Where does your authority emanate when you're in a joint position like that? As an Army Command Sergeant Major, the Army Regulation 600-20 states these are the roles and functions and missions of each of the non-commissioned officer ranks. So as the SEAC, where you have to operate in a joint environment, often without a lot of, it's a new position, so there's not a lot of past practice and there's not a lot of rules written. How do you deal with the Marine General who has a desire for you to get work done? From where did your authority come?
Well, my authority came from the Chairman and Joint Chief of Staff and the Secretary of Defense. And what I did is I did what I call an elderism. I actually took all, you were 13 COSCOM. You dealt with many, many people. And tell me if I'm right or wrong, but during our time at war, 75% of your force was National Guard. So you had to learn how to deal with different societies, so to say. Because these are, when I say this, I don't mean no disrespect. These were civilian warriors in a way. They came to combat, became soldiers. You had to deal with all those. So what I did, believe it or not, is I took all of the core values of all the services, and this way we started connecting. Something simple is write down all the core values, writing down the definitions of each of the core values, sitting with the senior enlisted leaders and saying, look, guys, different words, same meanings. We're all the same. And I used to tell them, cover your services, and they would, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine. I said, what?
So put his hand on his name tag in case you can't see it in the podcast.
And what was left was, when I covered the Army, what would be left? Us.
Yeah.
And I would tell them, we are all about us. we have to, and the only guidance that I gave them, and they had to adhere to, was you will never make a policy that you yourself will not live with. And I told the Army, I said, Sergeant Major of the Army, you will not put my soldiers in pink tennis shoes unless you're going to wear them too. I just use it as an example.
Yeah.
So once I did the core values, something as simple as writing the core values, we started meshing together. And then I visit each of the services in their office. I didn't say, I just hit the desk, come to my office. No, right. I went to their locations. And somebody said, you know, Sergeant Major, you're very good about humbling yourself. It's not about humbling myself. And I told this general that. He said, you humbled yourself and went down to their office. What does that word mean, humble? I'm not better than them. We all eat 9s. Yeah. Well, actually, we just eat 10s. I didn't know that. But we all eat 9s, and I didn't hump by going to Dan Elder's office when I used to come visit you at Anaconda. It wasn't humbling myself. It was coming out to see how one of my fellow sergeant majors was doing.
Right.
Same thing with them. They're not sergeant majors. 2 of them are. 2 of them not, but they're senior enlisted leaders. I wanted to go and see how my senior enlisted leaders were doing.
Great.
Now I'm going to turn this off.
Yeah. We should silence all cell phones prior to podcast. No,
I have not been properly trained.
That's right. Yeah, but he just had a significant emotional event. Great technique, and I appreciate you sharing that, because we've got sergeants and sergeants majors and senior NCOs right now enjoying assignments, struggling with the same type of rivalries, maybe. So sharing your techniques is useful as we think through our own circumstances. But let me change gears for just a quick moment as we wind down the podcast. It's almost been 5 years since you retired from military service after over 33 years. Did you have any surprises after you got out? I mean, I know we all have stories we could probably tell, but either through your transition or once you got out, was there something that surprised you that you didn't expect or realize when you were on active duty that you're now dealing with now? No, not really. The only thing was I'm surprised I got a vacuum as much as I do. No, really, because let me tell you, Joe Gainey, Dan Elder were retired from the Army, correct? Yeah.
But the love we have for our service members will never retire. I just told a guy, I was telling you before we started, I met a sergeant outside, and I told him that. I said, the love I have for my service members will never die. Even when I die, I'm Native American, I believe our soul continues. My soul will still love my service members. Yeah. So I really didn't have no big surprises because, as I tell sergeant majors, you got to prep for it. You know, when you and I went into combat, we didn't have many surprises because we did our pre-combat checks in service. I was ready for anything that came. You know, a situation developed. Okay, it shocked me it happened, but I was ready for it. Yeah. So before I retired, I got ready for retirement. Even with my medical issues, I was getting ready for retirement. So there was no big shock for me. Good. Well, let me ask. I mean, I know you're still supporting soldiers. I mean, you meet with them, on the street corner or in a formal setting. I know you're not done yet, is what I'm saying. But as you look back, is there something that you wish you would have done that you haven't done? Is there something you look back and say, boy, I wish I could have got this done before I left? Yeah. I really wish that I would have worked harder as a SEAC on the benefits of our soldiers. Wow. Yeah. I mean, really, because I was working this, Tom McMurtry came up with longevity pay. Okay. Master Sergeant Cerise Heineman came up with the education. We can give you education to your family. Now, that's been changed a good bit, but I wish I would have transferred 9/11 GI Bill benefits. Right. So she came up with that. Nobody else did. And what I wish I would have done is I wish I would have, and I'm telling Brian Battaglia this now, I wish I would have testified more in front of Congress, and my testimony would not have been the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, because they do that. Right. Benefits of the armed forces. And Brian's doing that now. And I told him, brother, don't make the same mistake I did, because I think if I would have, it wasn't because I didn't want to. I was traveling a lot. And I've told Brian, don't tell your neighbor to cut his grass if your grass is not cut. And I was trying to establish a position worldwide, so I traveled 9 months out of the year. So I wish I would have stayed home a little bit more. I really do. Now, before we close up, I do want to tell my young soldiers something. You know how you asked me a question a while ago, or you hinted at it. How do we know when to do certain things? You know, training, correcting, it don't matter. Here's what I told Second Lieutenant Gainey. He still uses it. I said, Joe, kind of surprising, his name's Joe too, but I said, Joe, listen to me, son. Whenever you find yourself in a situation where you're trying to talk yourself into doing it, stop, take 2 steps back, and rethink it. Because if you're trying to talk yourself into doing it, it's wrong.
Wow.
Seek advice from someone. Okay, so that's what I told them.
Well, Sergeant Major, I tell you, we're so excited you gave up your time to help us share knowledge and information with non-commissioned officers here on the NCO Guide podcast. This podcast is about sharing. You are definitely one of our Army's contemporary senior leaders who have helped shape the Army as it is today. And I know my readers, my listeners, are excited that you came out here with us today. So I personally want to thank you on their behalf. We'll put this.
You've been listening to the NCO Guide podcast, sponsored by PPTclasses.com. PPT Classes, your one-stop shop for all of your pre-made classes needs. The NCO Guide is a Top Sarge Business Solutions Productions and partners with TBSVet.com. All our music is provided courtesy FreeStockMusic.com. Thanks, and come back again.